Napoleon I, also known as Napoleon Bonaparte, was a French military commander and emperor who ruled over a large portion of Europe in the early 19th century. Napoleon, who was raised on the island of Corsica, advanced through the military ranks quickly during the French Revolution, 1789 to 1799. He declared himself emperor in 1804, following a coup d'état that saw him seize governmental control of France in 1799. Napoleon successfully fought war against numerous coalitions of European states and grew his empire via cunning, ambition, and expert military strategy. However, Napoleon abdicated the crown and was exiled to the island of Elba 2 years after a catastrophic French invasion of Russia in 1812. During his 100 Days campaign in 1815, he briefly reclaimed control. He again abdicated after suffering a humiliating loss at the Battle of Waterloo and was banished to the isolated island of Saint Helena, where he passed away at the age of 51. On August 15, 1769, in Ajaccio, on the Mediterranean island of Corsica, Napoleon Bonaparte was born. He was the second of Carlo Bonaparte's, 1746 to 1885, 8 surviving children, born to Letizia Romolino Bonaparte, 1750 to 1836. His parents were little Corsican aristocracy, but the family wasn't particularly affluent. The Italian city-state of Genoa sold Corsica to France the year before Napoleon was born. Later, Napoleon changed the spelling of his last name to French. Did you realize? The Rosetta Stone was found in 1799 by a French soldier named Pierre-François Bouchard, 1772 to 1832, who was serving in Egypt as part of Napoleon's military campaign. The discovery of this item led to the decipherment of the almost 2,000-year-old written language known as Egyptian hieroglyphics. The French language was taught to Napoleon while he was a child, while he attended school on the French mainland. Napoleon later graduated from a French military institution in 1785. The French Army's artillery regiment then promoted him to second lieutenant. The French Revolution started in 1789, and within 3 years, the monarchy was toppled and a republic was declared. Napoleon spent the early years of the revolution mostly at home in Corsica, while on vacation from the troops. There, he joined the Jacobins, a political movement that supported democracy. The Bonaparte family left their native island in 1793 and moved to France's mainland after a fight with the nationalist Corsican governor Pasquale Paoli, 1725 to 1807. Napoleon then resumed his military service. Napoleon became identified in France with Jacobin Augustin Robespierre, 1763 to 1794, who was a major driving force behind the Reign of Terror, 1793 to 1794, a period of repression against the revolution's foes. Robespierre was the brother of revolutionary leader Maximilien Robespierre, 1758 to 1794. Napoleon received a promotion at this time, becoming an army brigadier general. However, Napoleon was briefly placed under house arrest for his ties to the brothers after Robespierre lost control and was executed, together with Augustine, in July 1794. Napoleon, was appointed to Major General and assisted in quelling a royalist uprising against the revolutionary government in Paris in 1795. The revolutionary government of France has been at war with several European states since 1792. Napoleon led a French army in a series of engagements in Italy in 1796 that saw off the bigger armies of Austria, one of his nation's main foes. The Treaty of Campo Formio, which was signed in 1797 by France and Austria, gave the French territory gains. The Directory, a five-person council that had ruled France since 1795, proposed allowing Napoleon to spearhead an invasion of England the next year. Napoleon concluded that the inferior French Navy was not yet prepared to take on the superior British Royal Navy. Instead, in an effort to destroy British trade routes with India, he suggested invading Egypt. At the Battle of the Pyramids in July 1798, Napoleon's forces defeated Egypt's military tyrants, the Mamluks. However, soon after, his forces were stranded after his naval fleet was all but destroyed by the British at the Battle of the Nile in August 1798. Early in 1799, Napoleon's troops invaded Syria under the control of the Ottoman Empire. The expedition ended with a failed siege of Acre, which is now in modern-day Israel. Napoleon, who was always ambitious and clever, made the decision to leave his army in Egypt and return to France that summer because of the tumultuous political climate in France. Napoleon was a member of a gang that successfully toppled the French Directory in November 1799 in an incident known as the coup of 18 Brumaire. Napoleon holds the position of first consul in the three-member consulate that replaced the Directory, became France's most important political figure. Napoleon's soldiers expelled the Austrians from Italy in June 1800, after defeating one of France's long-standing foes at the Battle of Marengo. The triumph contributed to Napoleon's assassination as first consul. Additionally, the war-weary British consented to peace with the French in the Treaty of Amiens in 1802, although the peace would only last for a year. Napoleon attempted to bring stability back to France after the Revolution. He organized administration, enacted banking and educational reforms, promoted the sciences and the arts, and attempted to mend strained ties with the Pope, who represented France's dominant religion, Catholicism, which had been caused by the Revolution. The Napoleonic Code, which streamlined the French legal system and now serves as the cornerstone of French civil law, is one of his most notable achievements. Napoleon became the nation's first lifelong consul in 1802, according to a constitutional reform. He declared himself the new Emperor of France in a spectacular ceremony held at Paris's Cathedral of Notre Dame 2 years later, in 1804. Napoleon married Josephine de Beauharnais, 1763 to 1814, a fashionable widow with two adolescent daughters who was 6 years his senior, in 1796. After having no children of his own with Empress Josephine more than 10 years later, in 1809, Napoleon had their marriage dissolved. so he could find a new wife and have a child. He married Marie-Louise, 1791 to 1847, the Austrian emperor's daughter, in 1810. She gave birth to their son, Napoleon Francois Joseph Charles Bonaparte, 1811 to 1832, who would go on to become known as Napoleon II and be crowned King of Rome the following year. Napoleon had several other children outside of marriage, in addition to his son with Marie-Louise. The Napoleonic Wars were a series of significant confrontations between France and various coalitions of European countries that lasted from 1803 until 1815. Napoleon sold France's Louisiana territory in North America to the newly established United States for $15 million in 1803, a deal that ultimately came to be known as the Louisiana Purchase, in part to earn money for upcoming battles. Napoleon's navy was completely destroyed by the British at the Battle of Trafalgar in October 1805. At the Battle of Austerlitz, which took place in December of that same year, Napoleon's army overcame the Russians and Austrians, earning it the reputation of being one of his greatest victories. The Confederation of the Rhine was founded after the victory, which caused the Holy Roman Empire to collapse. With the implementation of the so-called continental system of European port blockades against British trade beginning in 1806, Napoleon attempted to engage in extensive economic warfare against Britain. Alexander I, 1777 to 1825, was compelled to sign the Treaty of Tilsit in 1807 as a result of Napoleon's victory over the Russians at Friedland in Prussia. In 1809, the French beat the Austrians at the Battle of Wagram, resulting in significant conquests for Napoleon. In these years, Napoleon expanded his empire across most of Western and Central Continental Europe, re-established the French aristocracy, which had been destroyed by the French Revolution, and started bestowing titles of nobility onto his devoted friends and family. In 1810, Russia withdrew from the continental system. In retribution, Napoleon launched a huge army into Russia in the summer of 1812. Rather than engaging the French in a full-scale battle, the Russians adopted a strategy of retreating whenever Napoleon's forces attempted to attack. As a result, Napoleon's troops trekked deeper into Russia despite being ill-prepared for an extended campaign. In September, both forces sustained considerable casualties in the indecisive Battle of Borodino. Almost the entire population had evacuated when Napoleon's forces arrived in Moscow. In an effort to starve the enemy troops of supplies, retreating Russians started fires all over the city. Napoleon was forced to order his starving, worn-out army out of Moscow after waiting a month for a surrender that never materialized. This was because the Russian winter had begun. French forces were fighting in the Peninsular War, 1808 to 1814, at the same time as the disastrous Russian invasion, which led to the Spanish and Portuguese and the British driving the French out of the Iberian Peninsula. This defeat was followed in 1813 by the Battle of Leipzig, also known as the Battle of Nations, in which a coalition of Austrian, Prussian, Russian, and Swedish forces defeated Napoleon's forces. After that, Napoleon fled to France, and a coalition of forces took control of Paris in March 1814. On April 6, 1814, Napoleon, then in his mid-40s, was compelled to abandon the monarchy. He was banished to Elba, an Italian island in the Mediterranean, as a result of the Treaty of Fontainebleau. He was granted control of the tiny island, and his wife and son left for Austria. Napoleon left Elba and traveled to the French mainland with a group of more than 1,000 supporters on February 26, 1815, less than a year after going into exile. On March 20th, he returned to Paris, where he was welcomed by cheering crowds. When Louis XVIII, 1755 to 1824, the new king, fled, Napoleon started what would become known as his 100 Days Campaign. A coalition of allies, the Austrians, British, Prussians, and Russians, who viewed the French emperor as an enemy, started making war as soon as Napoleon returned to France. Napoleon organized a new army and made plans to assault ahead of time, taking out the Allied forces one by one, before they could fight him collectively. His soldiers occupied Belgium in June 1815, taking advantage of the presence of British and Prussian troops there. On June 16, Napoleon's army overcame the Prussians at the Battle of Ligny. However, 2 days later, on June 18th, at the Battle of Waterloo near Brussels, the French were crushed by the British, with support from the Prussians. Napoleon was banished to the inaccessible, British-controlled island of Saint Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean in October 1815. At age 51, he passed away there on May 5, 1821, most likely from stomach cancer. Napoleon was buried on the island, despite his request to be buried on the banks of the Seine, among the French people I have loved so much. During his time in power, Napoleon frequently posed for paintings with his hand in his vest, leading to some after his death that he had been plagued by stomach pain for years. His remains were brought back to France in 1840 and interred in a crypt at Les Invalides in Paris, alongside other French military leaders. The only way to lead people is to show them a future. A leader is a dealer in hope. Envy is a declaration of inferiority. The reason most people fail instead of succeed is they trade what they want most for what they want at the moment. If you wish to be a success in the world, promise everything, deliver nothing. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.